Hello and welcome back. This week we have the message from Denis.G, exploring through the reading of Mark chapter 9, verses 33 to 49, the concept of the costly path and what it means for being, becoming, and doing like Jesus. I hope you find this podcast interesting, and if you do, give us a like so we know. God bless. See you next time.
You know, it is incredibly easy to treat spiritual life like downloading an app. Like you click install, wait a few seconds, and boom, you're updated.
Right, like it's supposed to be instant.
Exactly. But then you actually try to run that ancient operating system on the high-speed hardware of modern life, and suddenly everything just crashes. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking an audio sermon on Mark chapter 9 today, which is heavily focused on what it actually costs to follow Jesus.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to extract the speaker's practical blueprint for discipleship. Exploring that intense friction between ancient faith practices and our daily lives.
Right, and just to be clear up front, we are looking at this through an impartial lens today. Not to preach or endorse, but really just to extract the psychological and practical mechanics laid out in the source. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the sermon presents a very specific three-part framework for navigating all that friction. It's basically be with Jesus, become like him, and do as he did. It's framed as this operational manual for character transformation.
Wait, just executing that first step to just sit and be feels almost impossible.
Oh, absolutely. It is incredibly hard.
I mean, how do you actually do that in our hyper-scheduled reality? The speaker even highlights his own incredibly chaotic week leading up to the sermon. He is working for an MG car dealership, juggling these cross-country drives across the UK, dealing with a 5:00 a.m. work crisis.
Yeah, all while rushing his daughter to the hospital for hernia surgery.
Exactly. Trying to fit quiet contemplation into that mess is literally like trying to force a meditative pause button into a high-speed blender.
What's fascinating here is how that exact friction kind of defines the entire journey. The speaker shares this really striking quote from a sermon his own daughter preached, actually. She said, "Salvation is free. Discipleship is costly."
Hold on, if salvation is free, why is the second part so grueling? I mean, isn't faith supposed to bring peace, not, more daily friction?
Well, that is the core tension right there. The cost isn't necessarily a physical or financial one. It's the grueling, lifelong internal work required to fundamentally override your default human reactions.
Like stopping yourself from just snapping at someone.
Precisely. It is the daily friction of choosing not to operate on autopilot when that high-speed blender of life is pushing you to stress out.
So how do you actually pay that cost? Because honestly, willpower alone isn't going to survive that blender.
Right. Willpower fades. The speaker argues it requires three specific currencies or pillars of change, which are humility, encouragement, and self-sacrifice.
Okay, so humility is the starting point, right?
Yeah, specifically regarding how we protect and guide those who are young in faith. And to explain why inexperienced people desperately need the guidance of the mature, he tells this wild story from when he was 6 living in Scotland.
Oh, right, where he got separated from his family at a park.
Exactly. In his 6-year-old mind, he logically reasoned they must have driven home without him. So he just decided to walk the 5 miles home alone, sobbing the whole way.
Until a stranger stopped him and called the police, thankfully.
Right.
And as he measured later, that walk would have taken a grown adult 2 hours. But that perfectly illustrates the why behind humility. You might feel entirely confident in your plan, but without the perspective of someone further down the road, you are just blindly wandering into danger.
Precisely. And recognizing that you are lost and need help requires that second pillar, encouragement. Realizing your own flaws is just incredibly demoralizing.
Oh, for sure. It's an awful feeling.
So the source emphasizes that mature guides shouldn't just point out mistakes. They have to actively supply courage to those struggling. Encouragement acts as that psychological fuel that keeps you moving forward when the internal work gets exhausting.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because recognizing you need that guidance and relying on others for encouragement inevitably means you have to let go of your own pride.
Which leads right into the final pillar, self-sacrifice.
Yeah. The sermon tackles this visceral metaphor from Jesus about cutting off a hand if it causes you to sin. And the speaker clarifies this isn't literal mutilation, obviously. He frames it using the analogy of a hot air balloon.
And that balloon analogy is just brilliant because it explains how this sacrifice actually works mechanically. To rise, you have to actively toss out the heavy sandbags weighing you down.
Like resentment, anger, or, hidden sins.
Exactly. They aren't just bad habits. They act as an actual gravitational pull on your character. You simply cannot elevate if you are hoarding weights.
So what does this all mean? For you listening today, next time you are stuck in that high-speed blender of a week, remember that discipleship is not a one-time achievement.
Not at all.
It is a messy daily struggle to incrementally elevate your character by actively throwing off whatever drags you down.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a really provocative question to consider on our own.
What's up?
Well, if spiritual growth is like tossing those heavy sandbags of obvious sin overboard to make the balloon rise, what happens when the obvious sins are gone?
Oh, wow.
Does true growth eventually require you to start sacrificing perfectly good and comfortable things just to make room for the ultimate thing?